Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today I will be reacting to the first ever solo album by Neil Young. It's from late 1968, and it's simply titled Neil Young. So Neil Young has been in the popular discourse lately. I have complicated feelings about that. Basically, I think deplatforming should be an extreme measure, and I don't think Joe Rogan's views overall are the right-wing extremist thing they're made out to be. He's had some good leftist interviews over the year. Check out his conversations with Bernie Sanders, Cornel West. I'm looking forward to the new one with Ben Burgess. That aside, I did broadly before that admire Neil Young as a musician, and I still do. And just his name being in the discourse made me think, okay, well, now I want to take my Neil Young listening to the next level. I know some of the big hits, Old Man, Heart of Gold, etc. But now I want to listen to it more systematically. And what record could be more enticing than this beautiful cover we have here? This painting, it's done by a man named Roland Deal. And there's lots I like about it, the sort of fluid texture of the sky, the green city hanging out from under Neil Young's body. Now, as far as I can tell, this painter, Roland Deal, doesn't seem to have any other major works out there. But that's a real shame, because this is quite the captivating image, and it gets at some of the themes of this record. So this record opens up with a track called The Emperor of Wyoming. It's a nice little country instrumental. And then we get to the first song with some lyrics and some edge, and it's called The Loner. And it's an interesting song because it's not about the general concept of being a loner. It feels like it has some specificity, like it's either about Neil Young himself or some character. He writes, "He's a perfect stranger, like a cross of himself and a fox. He's a feeling arranger." This is quite the image inside someone's mind. They're a loner, but they're constantly planning things, constantly coming up with ideas, maybe for friendships or manipulative relationships, whatever you want to think this means. And then there's a lot of menace and the chorus, and it comes as a bit of a surprise. It sort of contrasts with the verse. And that's one of the things I like about this record. Like, these songs, even though they're songs nominally coming from the folk tradition, some of them feel quite complicated. Like, there's some jazzy influence. Their melodies aren't quite as straightforward. The moods aren't quite as linear as they might be on another kind of folk record. Track number 3 is called If I Could Have Her Tonight. And though there's a kind of cool sound to the instrumentation, Neil's voice here has no edge whatsoever. It's pleading, it's sensitive, it's charmingly insecure. What if she came to me? Would she be kind? And if she stayed with me, do you think she'd like me? To do anything I would, or would she leave me? Track number 4 seems to continue on those themes. It's called I've Been Waiting for You. It's a straightforward, longing love song. It opens with a bit of a catchy organ sound, basically pleading for love, just like he was suggesting in an I Could Have Her Tonight and in The Loner. One of the other important thematic things that I think comes up in this track is this woman he's longing for is a woman with the feeling of losing once or twice. So this is Neil Young's debut album. He's 23 years old here, yet he's clearly already trying to talk from a place of wisdom, from a place of having gone through a lot. Speaking of age, the next track is called The Old Laughing Lady. Now, I've said that there's some quite complex songs on this record, and I feel like this one takes it to the highest levels. You have these soft sung verses, but then between the verses, you have orchestral instrumentation and a choir that is on the one hand beautiful, but kind of a stand-in for the old lady's laughs. As for the actual meaning of the song, the consensus seems to be it's about addiction, and that works when I look at it. I feel like the old lady, she works as almost a Rorschach test. You hear a laughing old lady, and perhaps you think sweet, harmless, possibly vulnerable person, or you put together the words of laughing an old lady, and it's a witch in the Macbeth sense. The second half of the record starts with an instrumental, just like track 1. We have a song called String Quartet from Whiskey Boot Hill, credited to Jack Nitzsche. And then we get another Neil Young composition, and just like Laughing Old Lady, it's a rich, provocative, complex kind of a composition. It's called Here We Are in the Years. One of the verses that most strike me goes, "What a pity that the people from the city can't relate to the slower things that the country brings." So you see that lyric, and perhaps you take a superficial look at this cover art, and you think this is Neil Young saying, I'm a man from a country, but it's not a simple little country twang of a song. This verse actually sounds quite jazzy, maybe a bit psychedelic. It's not just slow, simple country. It also, I would say, predicts the album's shortcomings, which I'll get to in a bit. It's saying, what a pity the people from the city can't relate to the slower things. Like, this is not a straightforwardly catchy album. It's something that requires a bit of a slow listen. The next track is called What Did You Do to My Life? So this is a breakup song, and what I like is the way Neil uses his voice to create two very different characters. And the chorus, it goes, I don't care if all the mountains turn to dust in the air. And then a backup singer, who's also Neil Young, says, what did you do to my life? But even though it's Neil Young singing both of these parts, he's singing with completely different expression. So the first part, he has this haunting nihilistic sound, and playing the other character, he's clearly terrified of this nihilistic side. What did you do to my life? The next song is called I Loved Her So Long. This has a beautiful yearning chorus that makes good use of backup singers, and again gets at this weird sense that young Neil Young has, that he's quite aged. Can you see her in the distance as she tumbles by, veteran of a race that should be over? And finally, we get to the last song on the record. It's called Last Trip to Tulsa. If you look at the lyrics, it's kind of like Neil Young's version of Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. And this song is just Neil Young playing with his guitar. There's no complex instrumental arrangement. And again, that theme of being aged comes up. He says he used to be a folk singer. I mean, come on, Neil, this is your first solo album. In one interview about the song, Neil Young said he wanted to write a song about the American South because for him, that's what he thinks about when he thinks about America, capital A. America to him, I guess, has to be this mystical place, something alien. So he's saying, yeah, I mean, I have a relationship to New York, but New York's not really America. And it's a funny idea. Neil Young is one of the most famous Canadian singers, and Canada kind of exists to be not America, even though, for lots of intents and purposes, it's the same country. And this song, again, kind of brings together the perspectives of Bob Dylan and Neil Young, because technically Bob Dylan is from America, though he's right by the Canadian border in Duluth, Minnesota, and Neil Young is Canadian. But both have the sense that somewhere in the American South and West, there's this more mystical, powerful America, that's the part of America that's worth writing folk songs about, not New York City. So Neil Young, from my reading, and this jives with my listening experience, was one of his less successful records. And a big reason for this is that the mixing on it wasn't very good. Neil Young was apparently not happy with his voice. I'm not sure if he hadn't convinced himself that his unique countertenor sound sounded good yet, or it was something specific to these recordings. But apparently he was very shy during the mixing process, or perhaps during the recording process. So in a lot of these songs, the instrumentation kind of drowns out the voice and you don't hear the specific lyrics. And that, combined with the complexity of some of the songs, makes it hard for this record to generate a hit. At the same time, there's so much beautiful lyric writing here, so much interesting stuff with the music. And when you listen to it on good speakers and you listen to it closely, the mixing really isn't so bad. Like, you can hear his lyrics well enough that I found this quite an enjoyable album. And I guess that kind of goes with the experience of looking at a painting. Maybe this is not about a rock star. This is an attempt to create something more artful. It speaks to the specificity of who Neil Young was going into the creation of this record. So I say there's all this reference to agedness, and you can see the way they paint his face. It emphasizes all the lines on his face, even though he was only 23 years old. Neil Young also had a complex identity, not only in this Canada, America, real America thing, but also in terms of country and city. He was born in Toronto, but he spent his youth partially in a small town in Ontario, partially in Winnipeg, which is a smaller and much colder city than Toronto. Went back to Toronto for a while, then went back to Winnipeg. He's someone who has this, complex identity where he identifies not as a city person per se, but he's not just a salt of the earth country guy either. So overall, very interesting album, but one you really have to take the time to listen to. I was listening to it on my walks on my Discman and not enjoying it, but when I sat home and put it in the player and took a time to look at the lyrics, I thought, wow, this is a pretty stunning record. Not his debut per se, because before this, Neil Young had been part of the band Buffalo Springfield, though that was more fronted by Stephen Stills. So I guess maybe there was some shyness about actually being the lead singer, being the center of attention here. And I guess it also speaks to the different ways in which we relate to time. So Neil Young, I keep saying he's only 23 here. This is his debut album. But I mean, Neil Young had been rocking since he was a teenager. He was part of a small band called the Squires. He became known to Joni Mitchell. She was into his music before he sort of had his first break in Buffalo Springfield. So to me, hearing this record, I'm thinking this is Neil Young. He's brand new, and this is hella ambitious and hella weird for a first record. But from Neil Young's perspective, 23 years is a lot of years to be on this earth. He'd done a lot of musical work before this, and to him, it felt like a veteran's album. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.